Hey guys, it's Olivie Blake, and this is me not writing. Okay, so let's see. It's the morning again, so I have coffee again. I know this is so responsible of me. Probably not given my excessive caffeine consumption, but no wine today, but I'm sure we'll get back there. Okay, so the reason we're doing this in the morning is, well, I gotta update you on some things. So I have a new job, which is going to require a bit more of my attention. I don't know how it's going to disrupt my schedule yet. I mean, it's definitely going to disrupt it, but I am very good at I'm very good at arranging my schedule. If I want to get a lot of things done, I can. So far I don't know that things are going to change. This is a good time for me. I think some of you know I work freelance, so this is a good time for me to take on a new job because I just finished the manuscript for Inheritance. It is now polished up and like being sent around a bit, so we'll see how that goes. My plan is to Lovely Tangled Vices is going to come out on Halloween. I talked last time about pre-orders, and I've never done a pre-order on Amazon before, but I think I will this time. Nothing's really different. You'll just be able to buy it and then get it like the second it comes out, as opposed to me being like, surprise, it's here, which you can still do. But anyway, so probably starting in October, you'll start hearing me talk a little bit more about Lovely Tangled Vices. I There's a few different things with that book that there's my phone's going crazy. Actually, I'm sitting here on the couch with my dog, so this might send him away. So we'll see. So there's a little necklace that is kind of significant to the story. There is a cocktail that is also significant to the story. So there's the makings of a giveaway in there that I'm gonna see if I can arrange in October. So keep an ear out for that, or an eye, whatever. So anyway, so I'm mostly in the editing stage. I did just start a new book. I wrote a book at one point called The Righteous Heirs of Petty Fortune, which I have made drastic changes to. The characters are the same, but they are older now, and it's set in I kind of fleshed out the world a little bit more. It's basically the magical world in this situation is very much like the regular world, the non-magical world, I guess I should say, in that there's like venture capitalist magical firms. There's a lot of like the characters in this story are academics, but it is in a world where magic is a lot like currency. So, I mean, I love to take the fantastic and make it just truly mundane, but it kind of boils down to a murder competition between 6 people. So, I'll leave you with that. That's my latest project. But since I don't have any sort of rush timeline on that, and I'm mostly editing things, now is like the right time for me to take on a bigger client. So yeah, so that's just an update. That's why it's the morning and I'm drinking coffee and I'm like, look at me, I'm like almost an adult. I have a bra on. This is big news. I don't like bras. That was my quick update about, someone asked about self-publishing on Amazon, and they asked if it was difficult. It's not. There's, it's called Kindle Direct Publishing. I mean, Google will be able to tell you just as much as I would be able to tell you. If you're interested in self-publishing your work, you could do that. I would say it would be hard to do without some basic design capacity, just because Amazon can help you design a cover and stuff, but the more you know what you're doing, the easier it'll be, because it's definitely a tedious process. The measurements and the details of things have to be exactly right. There's a lot of I've had a lot of formatting problems. Some things, no matter what I do for the ebooks, they still just don't come out right. So it's kind of a learning process, and the customer service it's okay. it's a little bit hard to get to talk to someone. The point is, it's just like, if you want to self-publish a book, factor in like a week or so of just figuring out how the process works, because you're going to have to try and fail a few times before it's actually like for sure published. Yeah, it's pretty easy to use from there. Like I said, if you just go on, I think it's kdp.amazon.com or something. I'll check it, but it's pretty straightforward. I've also used iBooks before. At the time, though, iBooks had an exclusivity clause, so if you put something on iBooks, then you couldn't put it on Amazon. Amazon doesn't have that, so if you put it on Amazon, you can also put it other places. So yeah. Okay, so I thought I'd tell you about what I have recently read. This has been a summer of rom-coms for me. I'm working on a romantic comedy script, so it's a rom-com female buddy comedy. So I've been watching and reading a lot of romantic comedies, and I watched Set It Up on Netflix, To All the Boys I've Loved Before. I recently watched, you know that one that's got Daniel Radcliffe and Adam Driver in it, and it's like, oh, Harry Potter and Kylo Ren are just like having a conversation. That's cool. I watched that recently. It has 2 different titles. On Amazon Prime, it's called What If. It was entertaining. I don't know if I liked it. Anyway, so I've also read, what have I read? The Hating Game by Sally Thorne, which was fun. Light, got through it very easily. And then I just finished The Kiss Quotient. So The Kiss Quotient is like, this is the library's copy. Sometimes because I read books so quickly, I get them from the library, and then if I like them, I'll buy them. Which I know is terrible. Like, as someone who's trying to sell books, I'm very sorry, but that, hey, I love libraries. If you can ever find my book in a library, I will not have any problem with that. So anyway, this book took me like a couple of hours to read. It is, I want to say, like 90% smut, which was fun. And it's a very fanficky premise. It's a woman who has Asperger's, which is very interesting. Being inside her head was like fascinating. Who is uncomfortable with sex, so she hires a male escort to give her sex lessons and relationship lessons, and it's a fanfic premise, and it works. And because I'm your best friend, I'm going to do a little erotic reading for you right now. So, The Kiss Quotient. When she flipped to the second page in the pile, he shrugged out of his jacket, draped it over the arm of a chair, and unbuttoned his shirt. Tugging the tails free, he sat on the bed next to Stella. She snuck a quick glance at him, and her gaze dropped to the portion of his skin revealed by his open shirt. The pen paused mid-scrawl, clattering to the tabletop. He smiled with satisfaction. Not so clinical now. She squared her shoulders before she lifted her hands to her collar. Buttons came undone at a painstaking pace, and white fabric fluttered to the floor, followed by her gray skirt. The set of her jaw was determined as she let him look at her, and look he did. He usually preferred women with bigger breasts, lusher hips, and rounded thighs. He liked their softness, the way they filled his hands. That was not Stella. Everything about her was modest. Wearing only a flesh-toned bra and panties, her petite body was composed of elegant shoulders and arms, a little waist that flared to gently curved hips, and shapely legs with delicate ankles. She wasn't what he thought he'd always wanted, but she was perfect. Take your bra off. His voice came out rougher than he intended, but he couldn't help it. He was dying to see the rest of her. She might not have fantasized about their time together, but he had. Down at her sides, her hands fisted. Is that necessary? They're not my best feature. They're small. Yes, it's necessary. Men like to see them even when they're small. And touch them. God, he wanted to touch them. She grimaced, looking like she wanted to argue with him. When she reached behind herself and slid her bra off, he caught his breath. Then he bit his lip as he grinned. Stella didn't seem to know it, but she had the kind of nipples men and babies dreamed about. Rosy-tinted areolas gave way to extravagantly protruding tips that, no question about it, had to stay pointed 24/7, hot or cold, rain or shine. Stella Lane, conservative economist, had porn star nipples, and he wanted them in his mouth. "What now?" she asked in a near whisper. He slipped his shirt off and tossed it on the far side of the bed. "I think you get to check a box." The kiss quotient. It's a fun time. Oh, so someone asked me if I could demonstrate in this week's video the motion of what curled a hand around his mouth looks like. I'm not sure why this is confusing, but you know, gestures are hard to describe. So to curl a hand around a mouth, usually my characters are doing this like wearily, like they're like, like that. So it's sort of a thoughtful, it'd be like the equivalent of a beard stroking, like curled hand around mouth. I'm trying to think of other gestures I use all the time. I use like wave to hand a lot, like meh, nah. I refer to gestures a lot in general. I think because I don't really see faces when I write things out, I just see gestures and motions. So running a hand through the hair. Sometimes I say skating or scraping a hand. So rubbing the temples, pinching the bridge of the nose. Yeah. So anyway, hopefully that clears things up. I've always mostly been friends with boys. I dated a lot when I was in high school and college, never for very long. So I've always thought of myself as kind of I think I've said this before actually, kind of a guy's girl, and I weirdly took pride in that. I think a lot of people, including me, have said things like, oh, girls are just, it's just so much drama, I prefer to have guy friends. And then I think at some point, I'm not sure if I can identify a turning point. Actually, I can. I was in a sorority. I'm not going to say which one, but being in a sorority really changed my life and my perspective on women and being supported by women. I lived in a house with like 60 girls, right? Which wasn't my whole sorority, but that was how many lived in the house at the time. And there was always someone who was in the room and you were like, hey, do you want to go see a movie? And no matter who they were, you know, they'd just be like, yeah, sure, let's do it. Do you want to go for a hike? Do you want to do this? It was this just community of women who worked really hard and were so smart and some of the funniest women I've ever met, ever. I mean, I could just talk forever about how much I loved being in my sorority and how much I learned from it. I really did feel like it was a house full of my sisters, and I started to figure out that it was such a shame that I would say things like, oh, girls are catty and girls are gossipy and I just don't want the drama, because that's just really put on us. That's not something that has to be there, because when you put those things aside and you say, I'm going to value this girl because she's like me, we are all part of this whole thing. I think that was my first step to realizing it was very small-minded of me to say that I didn't like being friends with women. Do I still feel like there's extra competition between women? Yeah, I do, and I think that's unfortunate, especially when I've worked in industries where it's mostly male and then women saw me as a threat. That's unfortunate. I think there has been a little bit of a tide shift where it's like, we are the women in this office and now we should get along, because only women understand the feeling of, I mean, only another woman is going to understand what it's like to walk into a conference room with a whole bunch of men in suits and you are just as qualified as they are, and someone asks you, honey, go get the coffee, or assumes you're the secretary. Only a woman is going to have that experience. When this Me Too stuff was coming out, there was a lot of sort of a familiar backlash of, she's probably lying. She's just trying to take down this powerful man. But when you think about it, I mean, I can't think of a woman who doesn't have a Me Too situation. Mine, the first thing that came to mind, I've said before that I was very music was such an important part of my life, and actually, when I went to I continued to play in college. I was I hate the word flautist, but I was principal flautist in my university orchestra. Um, but I quit because the the director had this way of he would berate me in public. So we'd be in rehearsal and he would just scream at me. And then afterwards, when I would apologize because I felt like I needed to apologize, he wouldn't yell at other people. He would just yell at me. He would say crazy things like move my head around more. Like that's not how you play the flute. And then after I would apologize to him, and he would take my face in his hands and he'd be like, no, don't worry. You're so beautiful. And there was something very wrong about this that I couldn't shake. He was always touching me. It was this weird mix of like abuse followed by inappropriate behavior that after a while I was like, I can't do this anymore. And in the music industry, I mean, in so many industries, this happens all the time, right? That like eventually the women just get weeded out because it's harder. It's harder to be a woman in so many fields that, a lot of times it's like this man is making me feel so uncomfortable in this thing that I love, but is probably not going to be my life. It's probably not going to be the thing that I spend most of my time doing. So it's easier for me to just remove myself from the situation. But it wasn't until all these Me Too stories were coming out that I realized every single woman has one of those stories, and that's so wrong. And I didn't tell anyone when this happened. And I'm sure there's so many things that have happened to other women that they don't talk about. And I think part of it is because we don't feel safe with each other, because we don't really believe each other. I tried to change by now assuming that the woman is telling the truth. Occasionally things break that I'm really bummed about. Like the whole thing with Aziz Ansari was hard to read and hard to sit through because it was just like, my gut reaction was like, oh, this is an easy mistake to make on his behalf. Like I like him. He's so funny. He's so charismatic. And like, maybe she was giving the wrong signals. And then I had to stop myself and be like, no, because why am I making excuses for him when I think we've all been in that position where a man has made us feel uncomfortable for whatever reason, and it is hard to say something. It's hard to be vocal because you're going to be met with that backlash of nobody believes you. In terms of my day-to-day life, I try to understand the women around me more. I don't always like all the women I meet. I mean, I don't always like all the people I meet, but I feel like especially with certain female qualities clash quite a bit. And there are definitely women who don't like me right off the bat. A lot of women find me threatening in ways for whatever reason. But I am constantly trying to put myself in their shoes because I can do it better than a man can. I can sympathize with a woman no matter what her personality is like, because I've been in her position in the world. I know what the world looks like through a woman's eyes, and I try to identify that like common thread between us and make use of it. And the idea of I believe her is so important to me. I don't want my gut instinct to be this woman is probably lying, because she's almost always going to be the more vulnerable person. In the story I just told you, that was a university orchestra director who had probably never had a complaint filed against him, and I was an 18-year-old girl who wasn't a music major and didn't know anybody in the administration and wouldn't have known what to say. And I just didn't say anything, and instead I lost something that I loved. I'm getting emotional again. That cost me something I loved. And I just don't want that to happen to other women. And, maybe that's an extreme suggestion, but I really don't think that it is. I think that things like this happen to women all the time. Yeah, I guess feminism to me means being a woman first. And if that means for a while that I believe women who the door swings the other way for a while, good, because we've earned that. We shouldn't be afraid to talk about our experiences as women and trust that other women are going to understand us. Because I think that we can. I think that we should. I think that the world would be better if women were friends with each other. If women could see each other as allies first instead of rivals. And, you can say whatever you want about the world now, but I think that primarily we are rivals because resources are scarce. Because, there are so many industries that are more likely to hire a man for whatever reason. That promotions, raises, we are competing with women for those things. But that shouldn't be the case. That shouldn't be normal. We should celebrate the women who are in positions of power, and we should celebrate female creatives. We have to fight for each other. We have to fight for each other. We have to take each other's sides. We have to protect each other because right now we're the only ones who are going to do that. That's probably enough for today because that was kind of a long rant. And there was an erotic reading, so. Also, sorry about all this bike stuff behind me. Mr. Blake is a cyclist, and there's literally bike stuff in every corner of this apartment. Every single one. Okay, well, I should go to work. Don't worry, I do have my dagger. Reminder once again that I am a writer and you can buy my books if you want. If they ever end up in a library, you can borrow them from the library. That's cool too. Okay, so this has been me, Olivie Blake, not writing. And thank you very much for being here. See you next week.
Hey guys, so I just woke up and I wrote this story, and what is the point of having a blog if I don't just read you my random stories I write when I wake up? So I have no makeup on and no bra, do not judge me, but here is the story I just wrote. It's about 2,000 words, so maybe 10 minutes long. Once it happens, it can't unhappen. Once it happens, it becomes the pattern of things, the sway of inevitability, as the road curves and they curve with it. Sometimes it doesn't happen. Then it can't be made to. This is an inevitability also, but because it's the inevitability of absence, it takes no shape. It can't be seen. It's the pulse between happenings. Once it happens, it can't be undone. Once it happens when they're 6 years old. Their families live in this same metropolitan area. These things are bound to occur. One mother says, "Oh, so sorry, my son pulled your daughter's hair," and the other mother says, "It's okay, boys are boys." And maybe one day, when that little girl is all grown up, she'll question why her mother would say such a thing, because now that boy will grow up believing he can do the grown man version of hair pulling. But at the time, she's 6 years old and knows nothing other than that her scalp hurts, and the boy is confused, because he has felt the strands of something wonderful he will never grasp again. Her mother will take her out for ice cream, and she will forget all about the pain until she feels all the different versions of it in some other place at some other time. He will eventually develop a fondness for brunettes. Once it happens when they're 13, which is a marvelous age for things to happen. 13 is one of those ages where she believes anything is possible, but the world is beginning to tell her otherwise. And because she hates to think such a thing could be true, she rails against it, and it manifests in angst. She listens to music that echoes her feelings of loneliness and fear, but still sometimes offers her little glimpses of wonder. She is still at an age to believe everything at once. For example, at 13, she believes the boy standing across from her might be the one. Of course, she doesn't know he's having a totally different experience. He is viewing her through the lens of his experience, which is less about impossibilities or possibilities and more about anatomy. He's dwelling on the sensation of what it might be like to put his hands here or here or here, and maybe she might let him do it more than once. Siren. Maybe He is dwelling on the sensation of what it might be like to put his hands here or here or here, and maybe she might let him do it more than once. Maybe he could write her a note, some kind of letter. Maybe she would say yes to letting him touch her if he could put this feeling into words. They look at each other and think some version of wow, which is a very 13-year-old feeling, but they are shopping with their parents, he for a new combination lock with his mother, and she for something her father has explained 3 times, but she still doesn't care enough about to understand. And so they keep walking, though they hazard a lingering glance over their shoulders. He ducks his head and she smiles nervously. Her father will take her out for ice cream later because her shoes, brand new, are covered in sawdust. Later, she will commit that single glance to memory as her first and briefest love story. He will think of her tits in the dark. Once it happens when they're 16, which is mostly a time of experimentation. She's grounded again, but her parents aren't completely unreasonable, so they let her go to this birthday party for her friend, which happens to be across town. No, there won't be alcohol, she told them lamely. This friend wouldn't do that. So she's allowed to go. Home by 9. 9, which isn't even a time that exists at 16. It's a stopover time, a holdover, something that will barely be noticed on its way to more interesting things like midnight or 3 a.m. She hates this party and considers giving herself a homemade nose ring when someone clears his throat. She turns. Hi, do you know Alice? He asks her, and she shrugs. Teenagers speak mostly in gestures. Eye rolls, shrugs, crossed arms. She does all of the above. He's cute, though, and so is she. She's a pretty girl who doesn't look like rebellion. It's her least favorite thing, that her outsides are so wholesome, but he likes it. He thinks she looks like a secret. He hands her a water bottle full of gin and they drink it together and they laugh. Later he slides his fingers under her cotton thong and she moans because she thinks she's supposed to, but really her insides freeze up and her brain goes think, 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 hammering into her at the same pace as her rampant heart. He's nervous. She's nervous. She goes down on him behind Alice's mother's prized rose bushes and she learns dick tastes a lot like sweat. He doesn't come, but he kisses her and she thinks this is sexy. It's 9 and she has to leave. He smiles and lets her go. This time, for the first time, he will see her again. There's an ice cream shop he thinks she'd like, and it tastes as sweet as she does. Sometimes it doesn't happen until they are in college together, at which point they could so easily be factored into a portfolio of careless one-night stands. Once it happens when she's been hanging out with her boyfriend of 2 weeks, which is a thing that could potentially last, only it happens. He happens. He's standing there with his fraternity brothers, and she's standing over here with her sorority sisters, and he smiles at her, and look at that smile, her friend says. And she has a boyfriend, but fuck it, she's looking. It's a very successful smile. A winning smile, even. It's a smile developed after rounds and rounds of success. It's a smile that probably had a beta version. Maybe he's some sort of serial entrepreneur when it comes to smiles. Maybe he sells each one at a different price and turns it around for more profit each time. Maybe he's an investor. He's got a financial sense about him. She doesn't notice she's walking towards him until she realizes Alice's giggling is no longer by her side and he's looking down at her, taller than someone with that sort of smile has any right to be. He says hi and she says, don't hi me, and he says, okay, what do you want? And she says, you can't just go around smiling at people like that. I have a boyfriend. And he says, okay, want a drink? She accepts and they fuck in his room. She accepts and they don't fuck. They chat for 5 minutes until she realizes this beer is warm. She accepts and she lets him go down on her and she thinks, wait, is this cheating? She declines and she leaves. She declines and he kisses her once, gently, and strokes her hair. She declines and he gives her a look like, honey, don't ruin this night for both of us, and she changes her mind and accepts. She clutches nervously at the beer she already has while he tells a couple of jokes that don't land. She kisses him with her fingers tight in his hair like she already doesn't want to let him go. It happens a different way, split into a million different fragments, but each time it happens. She wakes up alone with his phone number scrawled on her hand. She wakes up in his arms. She wakes up to his fingers sliding inside her and she thinks, oh Jesus, but whimpers his name. She wakes up and he sleeps. She wakes up and he's looking at her, smiling that smile again. She wakes up and her entire life is different now. She has an inexplicable craving for ice cream. Once it happens well after college. She's just broken up with her boyfriend of 3 years and he's in a bar. He's been fired for the first time. He doesn't know it's the last time he'll ever be fired. From now on, he'll be the one doing all the firing, though he can't see that from where he's standing, and he certainly can't see the astronomical projections of scenarios in which they've already met. So when he sees her, he thinks, I need a win. She's a win. Look at her, he thinks. She's victory incarnate. all dressed up and wearing red lipstick he didn't think he liked until he saw it on her. He sees her and zeroes in on her because he really is a businessman and he knows a good investment. He doesn't know she's uncomfortable in those shoes or that she thinks her mouth makes her look like a shiny, cheap prostitute. He walks over and says, "You're beautiful, you know that?" And she said, "Yes, I fucking know that." And he is awed, inspired, aflame. "Let's get out of here," he says, and she goes with him. They hold hands. She already knows what dick tastes like. He already knows how to make a girl come. Neither of them know how to do this, though. Neither of them remember feeling this way, and it's bright and flashy and new, even while it's quiet, and they lick ice cream cones without thinking of cunnilingus. They are children together, opening gifts. They are teenagers discovering life. They are adults and sad ones, and when he tilts her chin up for a kiss, she breathes something into his mouth he's certain is one word. Finally. He will marry her within a year. A few times it doesn't happen at all. That's fine. There are other people in the world. She shares her life with a husband, without a husband, with 2 children, and with 4, and with none. She dies tragically too young as the result of a freak ski accident, and he is somewhere else, across an ocean, building something he doesn't know will prompt an aneurysm decades down the line. They live separately, and their lives never cross. His children will have her smile and her sense of humor, and neither of them will ever know it. Once it happens when they're in their 60s and tired, their souls more worn out than their bones. Another siren. Once it happens when they are in their 60s and tired, their souls more worn out than their bones. They have lost people now. People and things and time have come and gone. They are waiting in the doctor's office to find out their blood pressures are too high. They're watching the news in silence until he says, "Wow, I can't believe they're closing that ice cream shop. It's been there for ages." And she turns to him and says, "Did you grow up here?" And he says, "I did, yes." And she says, "So did I." Funny, they remark, how we could have met 1,000 different ways and didn't. Funny that we came so close. Funny when really comedy and tragedy are so similar until they're not, aren't they? Funny until it hurts. Still, she is always the brave one, so she says what they're both thinking. I'm glad it finally has. Once it happens, it can't unhappen. It can't be undone. They will be intertwined and linked forever by odd memories and spare recollections, if not by traditions and vows and blood. That's the truth of people and happenings. 1,000 different versions exist from glance to glance and pulse to pulse. It may not always happen, probability being the flighty mistress that she is, and when that's the case, life goes on. They aren't anchors. They're merely swimming in the same sea. It may not happen, and the many ways it doesn't. Neither of them will feel the loss. But oh, once it happens, in some way or another, it lasts and lasts and lasts.